Hey folks, this is Takota Coen here, and in this video I'm going to give you more of a detailed breakdown of our smokehouse that we have on our farm. I'm going to be going through some of the details of how I cure the meat before smoking, how I set the smoker up so that it doesn't take a lot of time for us to manage through the day and through the night. I'm going to be going through some of the basic kind of design features of this smokehouse that's actually over 100 years old. And just a lot of other tips and tricks that I've learned over the years of running this really simple smokehouse. But before I get into that, I want to tell a quick story about how I came across this smokehouse. So this is actually my uncle's smokehouse that I got from just a few miles down the road. They were looking at getting rid of it a few years ago because they wanted to put a new building up. And he heard that I was in the market for one, and we came and got it. And he said he just wanted to be, when I made my first batch of bacon, he just wanted a couple pounds of it. And so that's what I got for it. Now, the reason I was so interested in this smokehouse is because as I was looking at other designs for smokehouses that everyone's probably seen the one online where the fire's, on the downhill side, and then there's a chimney that's like buried in the ground and it goes into the bottom of the smokehouse and up, and they look like a good design, but they're complicated to run. My brother used to have one when I was a kid, and he'd have to wake up every couple hours in the middle of the night and look after the thing. And it made great smoked meat. It was awesome, but it was just a lot of work. And as I say, if you're going to be lazy, you might as well be good at it. And so when my uncle was telling me about the smokehouse that he grew up with, he told me this story about how, one day when him and his cousin were out playing hide and seek, one of them hid inside this smokehouse. And, after someone found him, they went off and played somewhere else, but they left the smokehouse door open, and flies got in, and it ruined he said it ruined the summer meat. And he said he never had a beating like that in his life because they, ruined a whole year's worth of meat. And when I heard that story, just a light bulb went off my head. It was like, whoa. You mean your family kept meat inside just a wooden building all summer long through our hot days without any electricity, without any refrigeration, just in that building? And it just blew my mind that I never heard of anybody doing something like this. And it just really inspired me to wanted to get into smoked meats more and learn about how, folks used to do this. So anyways, brought the smokehouse home. We've been using it for 5 or 6 years now. I haven't kept meat through the summer in it, but I have no doubts that you could. It's not as fly-proof as it used to be just because it's an older building. But I like the idea that if shit ever hit the fan, we've got this as kind of a backup. So anyways, that's how I got into this particular smokehouse. And it really just kind of reframed how complicated we tend to make things in this day and age, to the point where it's basically a Rube Goldberg machine for a lot of stuff. And I'm guilty of that. A lot of the systems I built on the farm were basically 10 steps to be able to crack an egg. And it doesn't need to be that complicated. So getting into the design now of this building, it's about 6 feet by 7 feet in the footprint. The eave is about 6.5 feet, and then I would bet that the roof line is probably close to a 12-12, and there is a little bit of a chimney on the top there, and there would have been a screen on that in when it was used to keep meat through the summertime. And there is an opening on the side that was there was some fly screen on that, and those are the only openings that this building had in it when it was being used as a smokehouse and a summer storeroom for meat. And again, the door, just a simple door with hinges, and apparently this was tight enough to keep flies out, which is just brilliant. So, and as I mentioned, the way that they would smoke is they had a hole in the concrete floor that they would light a little fire inside, and then throughout the day they would just keep it burning with green, a mix of green and dry branches. That's the cool thing about cold smoking, is as long as it's below, I believe it's like 38 degrees Celsius, you don't need to have constant smoke. It can be intermittent. So that's really nice. But again, you still have to tend to it a lot, and there's lots of back and forth. So I like the idea that I can, worst case scenario, I could just light a fire on that concrete floor. It doesn't need a hole. I'm not sure why they did that, but the worst case scenario, I could just light a fire in this building and it would work as a smokehouse. Now we have electricity. I can run an extension cord over to where the smokehouse is. And that's another big piece I want to talk about too, is your smokehouse should be pretty close to where your inner zones are on your property, because it is something that, whenever you're running it, you don't necessarily need to be opening it all the time, but the fact that, every time, we drive up the road or walk down to do chores or something like that, I can just glance over, and as long as I can see a little bit of smoke coming out the chimney there, I know that everything's working fine and I don't need to go in and tend to it. So, with a bit of the modern amenities, just a simple hot plate. I like to use a 2-burner one because in the summertime, you only need to use one to produce smoke. But in the wintertime, it's nice to have a little bit of extra heat just to keep this building a little bit warmer. I have smoked meat in this through the dead of winter. It gets very cold here, up to minus 40 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit. And I've probably smoked at minus 20 Celsius, but I don't think it'd be an issue to smoke at minus 40 either. So just a simple hot plate, steel tray, could be cast iron, doesn't matter. And then I will cut green branches. I like to use Saskatoon wood or serviceberry. Cut the whole tree down and, bucket into lengths long enough to fit into the pan. And I'll actually pile them in so it's like a pyramid. And the reason for that is that with one load like that, I can smoke for easily 12 hours without having to look at it, as long as I get my settings right on the heat. And that does take a little bit of back and forth to get those dialed in. Because if it's, even with greenwood, if these are too hot, it will actually dry them out enough that it'll catch fire. And when it catches fire, it produces too much heat that it can, cause issues with it just heats up the building too much, and it wastes your sticks so that you have to load it more often. But as long as you get everything dialed in, I've done, runs right to the middle of the night without having to get up and check on it, which is really nice, especially with all the stuff that we've got going on. So that's the setup for the hot plate and the smoker side. I do have the chimney and the screen plugged, just because I found it was just letting more smoke out than necessary. I think those chimneys would have been there more so to let the heat out before, but because I've got this hot plate, it doesn't produce a lot of heat, and it stays below the danger zone when you're smoking. So that's the basic design of this particular building. And again, if I was building this, from scratch, I would try to design it so that worst case scenario, you could keep your meat in this all summer long. So having any of the vents screened, and it would be basically the only thing I would need to do is probably run gasket along this door and maybe shim up some of the the plates that are eaten down a little bit. But I have no doubt that this building could be used to keep meat right through the summertime if it ever came to that. So now getting into a bit more of the curing process for what I do. So whether it's I'm curing bacon or brisket, or I've done whole loins to then cut into chops later on, or I've also done hams. I think you could cure and smoke like they used to a whole half beef or a half pig. It doesn't really matter, but the core principles that I found when you're looking at curing, and again, I read a lot of books, I watched a lot of videos. I think people make it way too complicated with the temperatures and the pH and the nitrates and the this and the that, and it's like people used to smoke meat and put it in an oak barrel and ship it halfway around the world, and they didn't die. Now, there are dangers when you start to grind up meat and make sausages, hence why the Latin name for sausage is botule, which is where botulism comes from. So if you're going to grind meat, that's a different story. You need to have the nitrites and nitrates in there to solve that issue. But if you're doing whole muscle cures, what I found is the only thing you need is table salt. And I actually buy my salt in 50-pound bags. It's livestock salt. It's totally safe for humans. We've been using it for years. It's way cheaper. And as far as I can tell, it's the same stuff you buy on the shelf, just a fraction of the cost. So what I'll do is, whatever size meat that I'm doing, I try to get a 3% salt on it. And so you get a scale, get your weight on that, 3% salt, rub it all over that meat, and then put it in some kind of a container. If you have a fridge big enough, you can put it in the fridge, or you put it right in your smokehouse. And even if it's, warmer temperatures outside, it's fine. You don't need to worry about it spoiling. Obviously, if it was like above the danger zone, 38 degrees, you wouldn't want to be doing that. But as long as your smokehouse is in a shady position, that's really the one downside of this building is it's kind of out in the open and it's facing, the sun there. You can see it. It's it is more exposed versus where my uncle had this positioned in the old yard. There's big spruce trees around it. It was on the north side of the house. It was quite shaded. That's about the only thing that I would change about our design here. But I've got other root cellars that I can put the meat in, or I've got the larder inside the shop. I've done other videos on that. So I just put it in there, or sometimes I'll put it in the fridge. If I've got space in there. But so once I've got it salted, 3%, I'll let it cure for basically 1 day per pound of meat, like per individual size of portion. It's not like, if it's a 50-pound package of multiple cuts, you don't cure for 50 days. It's just if you got a pound of meat like that, 1 pound, 1 to 2 days per pound is good. Or another heuristic is like 1 day per inch of thickness of meat. And I do whatever's longer. And that's a minimum. I always tend to go more than that just to make sure. You can also tell by just how it feels. When you first put it in, it'll be like kind of floppy and limp. And then when it's done curing, when you hold it up like a side of bacon, it actually has its own kind of tensegrity to it that it holds its shape a little bit more. And so and then every day as I'm curing that, I overhaul it, which means like if I've got meat layered in my tubs, I'll flip the whatever's on top, put that on the bottom, and then every other piece gets flipped and kind of inverted in the stack. And you just, keep flipping that every 24 hours for a few days until the meat's cured, it's stiff, you've met that criteria. Then I'll take that meat, I'll put it in my commercial sink in the shop, and I just run cold water baths to try to wash the excess salt off. And sometimes I'll let it soak for 30 minutes to an hour, and keeping running fresh baths. I usually do like 2 to 3 runs of cold water just in the sink, and after about 30 minutes, I'll take a slice off, I'll fry it in a pan, and see how it tastes. And if it's still too salty, I let it sit for another 15 minutes until you get the right consistency. And that's just to make sure that it doesn't get too salty. Because it's not it wouldn't hurt you, but the eating experience isn't great. And you could soak it afterwards, but it's just way easier to do it before you smoke. Once I'm done soaking it in the sink, I'll put it back in the tubs, bring it out to the smokehouse, and I've got, various hooks. And, I really like these belly hooks that are kind of laid out in a grid there that are nice for the thick and long pieces of belly there. Get it all set up, have my wood cut, and just turn on, shut the door, and walk away. Then I'll let that smoke for 24, 48, 72 hours. It really depends. I just kind of go by the look. I'm looking for a nice, golden brown like that. I've done more or less, and I find this is a pretty nice coloring, just kind of a golden brown. And as you can see here, let's get out of the sun here. I'm getting nice pink coloration right through the meat. This is a thick cut of meat. This is belly from one of my 18-month-old sows. After they're done weaning, I harvest them so that they don't get too big, and it lets me work on my genetics with my pig herd. So but yeah, even on thick bacon like that, the smoke's getting right all the way through, and produces a really nice product. You can eat it raw right out of the smokehouse like that, and it's basically like a porchetta, or sorry, pancetta. But if you want to dry age it, you can then. I like to cut mine into blocks like this, so that I can put it in a bag, put it in the freezer. You kind of take out 1 pound at a time, and I just hand slice it if I'm going to fry it. Or you can let it dry age in your fridge, which will allow it to get a little bit more firm and dried out. And then you can slice it really thin, and it makes an excellent addition to your charcuterie plates there. And whether you're doing brisket or belly or the hams, I have done tenderloin, I've done cheese, I've smoked whole chickens in there. Doesn't matter. It's the same process. You don't have to salt them if you're going to smoke them in there, but if you want to do the curing and the salt process, and the smoke process, you got to do that first. So yeah, that's kind of the basic rundown of the smokehouse design, the placement of it in your inner zone, so it's easy to manage, and the how I go through the curing and the smoking process. There was a couple other comments I saw on the YouTube short that I want to address as well. One of them was there's a lot of questions like, why are you using green wood? Doesn't green wood have a bitter taste, or that's going to ruin the meat? I've never done anything other than, well, that's not true. I have done, when I first started, I was using wood chips, or like the pellets, the ones you just get for like the Traeger smokers. But the problem with that is I was having to come in every couple hours and fill the plate up again, because they're dry, they burn so fast, and it's expensive. And who knows where that wood comes from? Are they desiccating an orchard with Roundup and then cutting the wood down and then chipping it? And I don't trust that stuff. So I wanted to be a bit more self-contained with our smoke source. So I just started playing around with, can I just literally cut a whole tree down, buck it up into small pieces, and try that? And it's worked great. And I found it has no more bitter taste than any of the dry pellets that I've used. I've used apple and hickory and cherry and oak. And oak in particular has quite a bitter taste. And maybe it's just Saskatoon wood, that's green wood for that particular species, that doesn't have the bitterness. I don't know, but I would really encourage folks to play around with trying green wood rather than using the pellets, and just find something that works. I have heard that red willow makes a fantastic smoke source. We don't have any on our property, and I haven't been able to find any. But I also like the Saskatoon I think is the best smoke that I've ever had of all the ones that I've used. And then again, the other reason for using the green wood that's still fresh is it burns a lot slower. I don't have to dry it first. It's not an extra step, and it doesn't burn as fast. It's not catching fire and heating up that building. I have played around with cutting them dry and storing a whole bunch, and then before I wanted to smoke, I would put them in a bucket, weight them down, and then soak them in water. But it was just extra. Again, it's a Rube Goldberg machine. So literally it took me 5 minutes to get the smokehouse going. I walked over into that Saskatoon clump there, cut 3 trees out with some pruning shears, bucked them up, and away I went. So that's the process that works for us. I've been doing it for years. It makes fantastic meat. Like literally the only thing on this is salt and Saskatoon wood smoke. There's no sugar, there's no spices, there's nothing, there's no nitrates. And I've had multiple people who've tried it, when they come over for a meal, say that it's the best bacon they've ever had. And I would say that as well. It's hands down the best bacon I've ever had. Our pork is really high quality as well, but there's something about the sweetness of the Saskatoon wood smoke and just a little bit of the saltiness that it's really fantastic. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video of our little smokehouse setup here. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave those down below, and I'll try to get those into another video. All right, take care, folks. Bye.